This right here is the very first kitchen knife I've ever made. I probably made it about 6 years ago, and I made it for my wife. I put a nice smaller handle on for her. I polished the blade up. I got it really nice and sharp. I presented to her with pride, and she was really excited to use this knife until she started using it. And then she stopped. We're going to talk about that today. First of all, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Princess Auto. They have made setting up my shop just fantastic. It is amazing. I would honestly say about 25% of what I have in the shop is from Princess Auto.
If you're a knife maker, a maker, woodworker, farmer, prepper, beekeeper, hunter, automotive worker, welder, blacksmith, they've got so many things.
Thank you, Princess Auto, for sponsoring this video. Now, I didn't understand why this knife didn't perform well when my wife used it. It behooved me. I was like, what's wrong? It's a sharp knife. It's got a nice belly to it. And it wasn't until later on when I actually started cooking regularly, I actually brought this thing out and I started using it. And I was like, you know what? She was right. This thing does not work well. But why? Why? I started digging into other knives. And I realized that this knife has simply way too much meat immediately behind the cutting edge. It goes like, woof, instead of staying nice and thin. Now for EDC knives, for hunting knives, this is great. Like this thing would be fantastic for batoning wood, but that's not at all the performance that we're looking for in a kitchen knife. I later made this knife here. I wanted to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, so I started out with 1/16 inch 01 tool steel, and I took the grind about halfway. And this one performed very well until we dropped it and it broke. Now that's one other thing with kitchen knives is that they tend to be a little bit more fragile and delicate, but that trade-off is for performance. We ended up buying some handmade Japanese knives. This is a Masakagi Yuki Gyuto, and this is a Sanmai blade. And this thing performs very well. This is a great workhorse. Not super slicey, but way more slicey than something like this. And I actually went and took some calipers and I started inspecting some of these Japanese knives we had. And what I found was there's a few things that really affect performance of a kitchen knife. One, generally they start out with somewhat thinner material to begin with. Now this here starts out fairly thick right here at the handle, and it has a distal taper, meaning that the spine itself gets thinner as you get towards the tip, and that lends itself really well to fine slicing work. It still has some meat here if you're doing some robust chopping. And the other thing about it is that this has a hollow grind. They grind these on big stones, and what that allows is that right behind the cutting edge, it stays thin for a while. And that is the key to good kitchen knife performance. Later on, a couple months ago, I made this knife here, and this is my wife's favorite knife. Whew, we got some redemption. My wife loves this knife. I've sharpened it once, and we've been using it for about 8 months now. This one is S35VN 16th inch stainless steel. So we're starting out really thin, and we took the grind up fairly high on this one. Now, I had a little whoopsie-doo. You can see it right there. That's the thing with grinding these knives, thin knives, and grinding them thin is that they are more difficult than grinding like an EDC knife or a hunting knife. Like full stop, anybody that makes both and does the kitchen knives well knows that grinding kitchen knives is more of a challenge than grinding an EDC knife or a knife that's thicker or has a, it's not so delicate, it's not so gentle. If we look at a close-up, we can see that this here stays thin for a long time right behind the cutting edge. And again, that adds to the fragility of this thing, but it increases its performance exponentially. This knife slices so well. Even before I put an edge on it, I ground it to about 1/1000th of an inch. So when I sharpen this, I'm hardly touching it. But this thing, even after 8 months of use, it still cuts just like it, even like mushrooms, things that often will tear. This thing just glides right through them, super clean cuts. And I get a lot of new makers or guys that have been making knives and they want to get into kitchen knives, ask any advice, any tips. And I have one word that I always tell them: thin. Grind them thin. Kitchen knives do best when they're thin. Now there are specific knives for different things like Debas for like fish and different types of grinds, but as a general rule, knives in the kitchen should be thin. They should stay thin for a while past the cutting edge. And that just helps them slice through instead of wedging through whatever you're cutting. Now you can go on and on and on. You can get into like a 36-inch radius hollow grind. You can do S grinds, like this knife I'm working on. So I've got a 36-inch hollow grind going on in here, and you can see the flat right here. But what that allows is that it stays really, really thin right behind the cutting edge, and it actually goes in, which helps with food release. Now this is definitely something you don't need to start when you're starting kitchen knives. This is kind of a little bit more advanced of a grind. I'm even struggling with it a bit. But when this thing's all said and done, I think this thing is just gonna be amazing. We've got a really nice distal taper on this blade as well. I ground that in. But this is just gonna fall through the food. And then with this hollow grind here, in theory, and often it works, is that the food you're cutting loses contact with the blade, so you don't get that stickiness. Like if you're cutting potatoes or something like that, the stiction is gone because there's a little relief right there, and it just helps food fall off. So this is getting a little bit more advanced, but if you were a knife maker and you've been making hunting knives, EDC knives, all those great knives that are fun to make, super useful, but you want to get into kitchen knives, challenge yourself. Go super, super thin. You don't want it too thin, because I've ground a couple that were like wonky and you would use them and they'd actually flex. That's a little bit too thin, but there's a sweet spot. And the only way to know that sweet spot is to use the knives you make and try something, use that. See how the performance is affected by the grind that you put onto it. And it is fun. It is so rewarding to make a kitchen knife, because kitchen knives get used a lot, at least in our household. We cook all the time. And for me to make a tool that is just so nice in the kitchen, it feels amazing. It's very, very satisfying. And it's satisfaction you get every time you pull one of these out of your drawer, out of your knife block, off of your magnet holder, however you store your knives, never in the dishwasher. And you know, when I think about knives in general, it's very important to think about the intended use of the blade. You know, this knife is for delicate kitchen tasks. It's not a big knife. It's like a little petty. And even thinking of things like the angle of this, like I've got clearance for my knuckles when I'm on a cutting board. That's something I didn't always do. This one, I have it just because of the fact that this heel is pretty big, but even so, I've got less clearance to a cutting board with this blade than I do with this blade. It's because I angle my handles up a little bit. And the most important thing I think any knife maker can do is to use the knives they make. If you make kitchen knives, you should be using those kitchen knives. If you make EDC blades, carry them on you. Use them every day. A lot of new makers start out with super thick material, and that's fine. There's a place for that. There definitely is. But just understand what that thickness of material does to the performance of the blade, and do that by using them. Use your knives. If you want to get into kitchen knives, grind thin knives, use them, play with them. There's a different feeling after making a knife like this that's super light, super thin, and super slicey. I get more satisfaction out of this than any EDC knife I've ever made. Maybe that's just because we use this more than I'll use my EDC knives, but just something to think about, especially if you're new to knife making. Think about the design. Go into your drawers, your kitchen drawers. Pick your favorite kitchen knife that you have and measure it. Take calipers. Measure, see how quickly it gets thicker. Compare that to another knife that you like less, and just take note of the differences. That will inform the way you approach your grinder when you're making your knives, and that will help you to make really good performing blades. Ultimately, that's what it's about. Doesn't matter if a blade's super fancy. I mean, this is a nice looking knife. It's got some nice stabilized, I don't know, spalted maple, I think. Nice little carbon fiber end right here. Not super flashy, but man, this thing performs. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments if you have anything to say about this, or if you have questions. Hopefully this helps, especially some of the new folks who are just new into knife making or want to branch out into kitchen knives. I do mostly kitchen knives now. I definitely make more kitchen knives than I do EDC blades. They're more of a challenge, but I enjoy them more. I feel like you have a more refined product at the end of it. That's not to say that you can't make a very refined EDC knife, not at all. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you to Princess Auto for sponsoring it, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.